Hey YouTube, good morning. It's Chuck. Welcome back. I'm going to try something a little bit different today. I've done it on a few other video channels I have, but it's basically doing a little bit of work on the computer rather than the apiary. But the subject today I want to talk about is Jacksonville, Florida, Zone 9A, where I live, how to know when the flow starts. There's a lot of visual indicators out in the field, in the apiary, that you can tell when the flow starts based on the bees' behavior. Many of them are around robbing, whether or not they will go to an external feeder. I've shown a video on that. I keep an external feeder way away from my apiary, actually out in my front yard, and I keep it full of sugar water. If they stop going to that sugar water, there's usually a flow on. And right now that I'm recording this in August, they are going to that sugar feeder. There is not a flow on right now. But the beginning and the ending of the flow is 2 points that a beekeeper locally needs to manage towards, specifically with splitting and building up your bees and getting them ready, building up the force so that you can actually have your bees ready. Sorry for that pause there. So you have your bees ready to collect and make the most honey. That is the objective. So what I want to do here is explain a little bit of the equipment I use, which is a little bit advanced, meaning like it's kind of expensive and it's not for everyone, but I just want to kind of give you some information so that if you don't have this equipment, you can actually perhaps take this information and use it locally. I use sensors in my hives from this company called Broodminder. And here actually is the website for broodminder.com. I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. I liked the strategy of using data to help manage bees. And I'm just going to go to their catalog and just show you the two sensors I have. I have these sensors here, the Hobbyist in-hive temperature sensors. And you see, if you just go look at these are strips that go into the hive, and they basically measure temperature of the hive, and it measures it basically every 60 seconds and transmits it to a device that can either go to the internet or download it to your computer. So I have these in each of my hive, and I'll tell you, these provide the most data but don't really give much indication of the nectar flow. What really is the benefit of the nectar flow are the hive scales. So let me show you here. This scale, I'm just gonna click on all products here again, and I'm gonna go down to this one. This is the most affordable one. And this is just a sensor, and you can see it's $239. It's not inexpensive. And these scales essentially go under one end of your hive, and they're balanced on the other end by a little bit of a pivot point. So it's essentially weighing half the weight of your hive, and it knows how to do the math to weigh a hive. So these scales take measurements of my hive throughout the day, and over time, that data is really, really valuable to a beekeeper, because as the bees start to bring in resources, guess what? The hive gets heavier. As the dearth sets in and they start to consume resources, the weight of the hive goes down. There are a lot of ways of weighing the hives, but honestly, constant data collection is really the most accurate way of doing it. And me, as kind of a data geek, love this type of beekeeping. So let me go over to once you have these hives installed, you go to broodminder.com and you configure an apiary. Here I'm on another website here. I'm just kind of showing you, and I've got my apiary labeled as Chuck's Honeybees. And these are all the devices I have up on my hive. I've got a combination of scales and hives configured. I do not have something on every one of my hives. That would obviously be way too expensive. But these devices are installed here and configured here, and I give them labels and names so I know which one is which. If I click on my apiary, you can see it comes up, and up at the top it has the last 7 days. And I'm just going to quickly show you the type of graphs it gives you. Up at the top is total weight. Here is a weight change. You see it starts at 0 and it deviates over time. Here are the hive temperature readings, humidity readings, both forecasted and actually recorded. And then here's the little batteries that are in each of those devices that are supposed to last well over a year. You can see they don't deteriorate very fast. But I'm going to change the scale range up at the top from 7 days, and I'm going to go back to the beginning of the year. And I'm just going to go to February 1st, and I'm going to go to mid-June just to show this time frame here, because here in Jacksonville, this is the range where everything happens for us. There's a little bit of build up in January, but I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And if you see up at the top, now the date range is February 1st through June 15th for my apiary. Now you're going to see some magical things happen here on the total weight of the scales. You see here back in the beginning of February, the weights were in the 60 to 100 pounds depending on the line. And look at this decrease and then increase through middle of May. So what I've learned, and this correlates with what I saw in the field, the most valuable graph is a weight change graph right here, starting at 0 and changing on time. So I'm resetting 0 here. So let's talk about this one right here. If you look at these graphs, and I was measuring 4 different hives, they were consuming resources on average, and I'm just going to kind of find the sweet spot. It's kind of right in here, isn't it? Somewhere in this time frame. And look at where this is. Let's say that low point is right around March 26th. I could probably refine this a little bit more, and I'm going to reset my timeline to March 1st up here, and I'll show you how the data changes. So if I go up here, and I'm going to reset it to March 1st and hit apply. Let's go back to the weight change graph. Now look, it's a little bit more. It's starting here and the dip is coming on down. It's a little easier to see the low point of this graph on average. For the red line, and some of these drastic shifts are obviously when I could have added equipment and added another super. It actually looks like I supered up here around March 19th, doesn't it? Because there's a couple drastic changes on the red line and the green line there. But let's say the low point was kind of right around here, March 19th. Guess what that correlates with? That correlates pretty much with swarm season here in Jacksonville. That is when most of my swarms happen. If I look back over time and measure when my swarms happen, that is pretty close to it. And I think I have a couple graphs to show over time on that one. Let me see if I can pull those up without too much time. Okay, I probably fast forwarded or clipped it right there just because I went to get another calendar. This is a spreadsheet I keep in Google Sheets where I record every swarm I capture and what week it happened in the column. So here's the day that I recorded it. Here's the location. These are just my nicknames, so I remember where they were. But then I categorize it in a week number. So this is the week of the year. And then what I've done is I've graphed over here what week of the year most of my swarms are captured. And this goes back through 2018, early 2018 season. So we have 5 years of data here. In Jacksonville, it looks like starting at week 10, there's a drastic increase in when those are captured. And it just, you don't need to do the math on when week 10 is. If you come over here and look at when week 10 is, look, here's week 10 on March 10th, week 10, March 9th, week 10, March 9th, March 10th. So that week 10 is the second week of March. So let's go back to my data over here. And that second week of March is right here when the flow starts this year. So what does that tell a beekeeper? That means when your peak swarm season is, that's probably bam when the flow started. That is a magical thing for a beekeeper because once you know when the flow starts, you need to have your supers on, you need to have your bees healthy and built up to strength. And if you did splits and you did queen rearing, you need to have done it soon enough so that they are able to build up by that point. So let's do a little bit of other math on this and say, how far back do I need to go in order to have my bees ready by this second week of March in Jacksonville, Florida? So I've talked to you guys about how I keep notes. This is my Google spreadsheet of my notes that I put on the top of my hive. I have a date column, a notes column, and every single hive has a little bit of a queen math calculator here so that if I do a walkaway split or I do some queen rearing, I know basically the dates. And this is my rough math. And I say rough because there are windows around each of these dates. But if graph day is on day 3, cap is 5 days later, they go into the nuke about 4 days later, they hatch 3 days later, they mate 5 days after that, and then the laying 4 days later. That is a little more than 3 weeks. It's about 24 days with this exact math, but you could probably say that range is from 21 to 28 days or something till you have a laying queen from the day that she was grafted or the egg from when the egg was laid, because graft day is on day 3. So when the egg is laid, you have, let's just say 4 weeks to give it the upper end range. So if you go back to our management calendar and show this, if I want a laying queen and to have brood hatching, so hatching, remember, so laying is before the hatch. The hatch is another, 2.5 weeks after that so much. So you basically got 6 weeks until workers are coming out, which are going to be your new force coming out. So if you back March 1st or second week of March up 6 weeks, guess what? You're into the last week of January. It's pretty hard to find queens in January. Matter of fact, my grafting doesn't even start until February 14th. So right off the get-go, a beekeeper needs to understand you're not going to take a newly grafted queen into a new hive and take advantage of this year's flow very much. You have to overwinter hives in order to take advantage of this flow with this timing window of basically on when the drones hatch and the queens are able to mate and the eggs are able to hatch. So this is how the math works. And obviously, as a beekeeper, you need to manage to this, because if you look, the other end of this graph is when did the flow stop? It very precisely stopped. If you look at this math on May 21st, I mean, stopped. You look at this graph climbing every day and then bam, this day it stopped. That's magical to know. I mean, I don't think even my hive top feeder or hive feeder out in the front yard would have been able to measure that weight increase as precisely as that. Now, that means the rate of increase stopped going up. That does not mean the nectar flow went to 0. That just means the height of the weight of the beehive stopped going up and it plateaued, and it does start going down over time. And let me open up this window again to go a little bit further into, let's just go to where we are today. On the 4th of August, and let me move this, actually, since we know it was the second week of March, let me do March 14th right there and hit apply. You can start to see the dearth kick in. And if you look, and I am feeding a little bit, actually I'm not feeding any on the hives that we have graphed here, so the weights are not increasing from feeding. But I, of course, have taken supers off and I've done some other things with, but if you look, they've slowly started to decrease. And if you look up at the top at the total weight changes, you see basically here's where I extracted June 15th. You see I took all the honey off. But magically, look at these percent weight changes start to deteriorate down. This is them consuming resources. So in this green hive, which looks like it was the strongest, it built up the most, it went up about 95 pounds and it's down to about up 85 pounds. So they have consumed about 10 pounds of honey since the flow stopped. That is the math here in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, I keep saying Jacksonville, Florida, because if you're in a different climate, it's different than this. Your flow may be longer. It may start later. That is why I started this channel, is because this math is so hyper local to us. Maybe, a few hundred miles around us. I bet this doesn't even apply to Orlando, just a little south of me, or even up in Georgia. It might just be a few weeks different even. So, second week of March to the second week, let's say the third week of May are the magic months here in Jacksonville this year. And it is seasonal, rain ahead of time or after, and it could change when it begins and ends. But if you're to take 2023 and apply it to next year, 2024, you need your bees ready when they start swarming, week 10, the second week of March. And you need to have as much resources ready to collect honey in Jacksonville all the way through May 21st. And after May 21st, you pretty much are in the window where you probably could start taking supers off and extracting, or you can just leave them on there and let them finish capping and things like that. But basically the nectar flow stopped this year, that time of year. So that was a little longer than I thought, but it covered what I wanted. I wanted to talk about the technology I use to measure hive weights. I wanted to talk about the bee math that I use in order to calculate when you're going to have a worker force coming from a new laying queen, and how overwintering hives is so important so that you have those bees ready to go for that second week of March. And also some indicators about, hey, swarm season is the best indicator I can tell naturally of when the flow starts. So if you're starting to catch swarms, get those supers on, because guess what? The flow is probably getting ready to start or has already started. Let me know what you think in the comments below about this content. Hopefully this format with the green screen and the website, navigation worked okay. Have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon.